Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. Electronic waste, e-waste, is a vast problem and growing around the world. October 14th is International E-Waste Day, the day when the world's electronics producers and recyclers collaborate to increase the recovery and reuse of the more than 63.2 million tons of e-waste that we produce annually around the world. But only 17.4% of that e-waste is actually recycled. During the COVID pandemic, purchases and use of electronics has increased around the world. In Europe, the estimated increase was 4.6% in 2020 compared to 2019, making it more important than ever that we recycle this e-waste effectively. The US can learn from Europe, where 42.5% of their electronic waste is actually recycled compared to about 15% here in the United States. Our guest, Pascal Leroy, is the Director General of the WEEE Forum, an organization of electronics manufacturers working to develop global best practices in electronics recycling. You can learn more about the WEEE Forum at weee-forum.org. That was not easy to say 4 times in a row, but welcome to the show, Pascal. How are you?
Thank you very much, Mitch. I'm good. Thank you.
Well, first, tell us what your organization is doing on October 14th to raise awareness about e-waste recycling.
Well, maybe let me start by saying what the WEEE stands for. It's Waste, Electrical and Electronic Equipment. So it's the term we use in Europe to refer to e-waste in general. So basically all appliances with a plug or battery. And the WEEE Forum, so we say WEEE Forum is created this initiative 4 years ago. So this year is the 4th edition of International E-Waste Day to basically to raise awareness among citizens and consumers about the importance of returning electronic waste and the importance of responsible recycling. And so there are a number of initiatives that the PROs in the WEEE Forum, so the Producer Responsibility Organizations, the organization that collect e-waste on behalf of the manufacturers, because that's the, let's say, legislation in Europe that manufacturers of electronics are also responsible for the products at their end of life. And so we call them Producer Responsibility Organizations, or PROs. And the PROs in Europe have, and globally, because we are an international organization, are putting in place a number of initiatives. And what we have done as WEEE Forum, we have prepared a set of infographics, we have made animations, we have done vox pop interviews. We went to the street and we asked people, what do you think is the percentage of recycling and so on. And so we have done a number of things, and the PROs themselves, they can also do, for example, events at schools or collection events in your neighborhood, or consumer awareness campaigns, films, videos, and so forth.
Now, electronics manufacturers are increasingly offering recycling programs. What's the difference? Why is there such a stark difference between the U.S. recovery rate and what we see in Europe, for example, where really the EU leads the world? How much easier is it to recycle something in Europe?
Well, that's, Europe introduced EPR legislation, so Extended Producer Responsibility legislation 20 years ago in 2002. And the aim was to make sure that producers are responsible for the products that they put on the market at their end of life. And that was a general principle that was applied to different waste streams, not only electronics, but also packaging, for example, vehicles, batteries. So the principle that if you put something on the market, you are responsible for the proper treatment, the proper responsible recycling and collection of that of these appliances. Because contrary to other waste streams, the electronic waste stream is actually expensive to treat, because we're talking about toxics. So you need to treat to depollute, as we call them. You need to depollute these appliances. You have to avoid that the toxics enter the environment, the rivers and the air and so on. So that's quite important. It's a net cost. Recycling is a net cost, and that's the reason why PROs, Producer Responsibility Organizations, have to be set up so that this is paid for by the producers.
Well, do electronics producers in Europe actually use more post-consumer recycled material as a result of this success, or is this just a matter of capturing and processing it so that it can be potentially reused in any number of industries? Is this truly circular, in other words, or are we talking about a state where we are still trying to clean up our mess rather than reuse our mess?
No, whatever is, the definition of recycling is that it is used in other appliances. Mm-hmm. So nothing is being...
But what I mean is, are manufacturers in Europe actually trying to capture that material for their immediate reuse, or is it simply going back into a marketplace where it will be reused, but not by the same organization that made the original material?
No, thank you for clarification. The latter, of course. So the PRO, Producer Responsibility Organization, is a collective organization, meaning that all producers collectively pay for the proper depollution and treatment of the electronic waste. And then, as you say, this is recycled and it enters a marketplace in a way. So manufacturers can then choose to tap into that marketplace and use the recycled materials for new products.
Now, the laws, the extended producer responsibility law in Europe reflects a social standard that says we are going to recapture and reuse what we use as consumers. Why does Europe embrace that so much more actively than the United States, in your opinion? Is there an ethos of reuse that we're missing here?
I don't know, Mitch. It's a question I have been asking myself a number of times as well. I've been a speaker at several conferences in America, mm-hmm. and it's true that it's a different culture, and even within Europe, there's a difference in culture between, for example, the Swedes on one hand, and some nations in Eastern Europe that have that don't have the same tradition of taking care of the waste. For example, in Switzerland as well, there's that this has always been the case, that people return their waste items to a place where, and then they are sure that the municipality, in the case of Europe 20 years ago, municipalities or producers take care of the depollution.
That still reflects such a fundamental difference in our thinking about the use and dispose culture that we introduced in the 20th century. Do you think that in the 21st century that we can really achieve a circular economy in electronics materials and all of the rare earths, valuable minerals that go into them as well? I mean, what's your prognosis for our ability to stop having to extract from the environment and instead extract from our waste to create the next generation of products?
Yeah, I think we will either do this in a structured way. So we will actually choose to create such a circular economy, or the circularity principle will be imposed on us. And what I mean by this is that it's just not going to be possible to continue as if the resources are infinite. Resources are not infinite, and we are getting closer and closer to a tipping point or to a situation that is not manageable. For example, lithium we will need 60 times more lithium in just a few years' time compared to now, due to all the batteries for vehicles and so on. This is just one example. All electronic products contain critical raw materials, and they all come from countries like China, cobalt, and Congo, and so this raises concerns because the supply of these materials may at some point come to an end, and this will create a shockwave through the economy. And this has happened actually in 2011. And so whether we like it or not, we have to move towards that situation of circularity. And I think personally that in Europe, we've got now, let's say, a certain culture and a certain a political consensus that this has to happen, also because this is part of the New Deal, meaning that there's consensus among the politicians that we will not revive our economy by just continuing what we have been doing with this linear economy, make, dispose, and so on, but that we really need a new approach whereby we reuse appliances much more often, and we reintegrate the resources into new products.
So it's really on the manufacturers to start to put the programs in place to do this. And extended producer responsibility is seen both as a threat and a resource by those producers. On the one hand, a threat of being regulated by governments in a variety of different ways that raise the cost of doing business. On the other, they want to take leadership and establish a relationship with the consumer where they are capturing this material again, and to do so in their own way rather than be regulated. Do you find that in Europe, the electronics producers, Nokia, Ericsson, Philips, others, are more conscious of and invest more completely in capturing e-waste? Because you can walk into any Best Buy in the United States or a Staples, for instance, and hand them your electronics. Is it any different in Europe?
I think that, let's say 20, 25 years ago, there were also manufacturers in Europe that were quite skeptical vis-a-vis the EPR principle, turning it into a mandatory obligation. But I think 20 years after the adoption of that legislation, I think, there's broad consensus that this is the way to go. Of course, that doesn't mean that situation is perfect. For example, sure. Enforcement is still a big problem, meaning that the authorities do not, consistently enforce legislation. And that's a very big concern for manufacturers. Also, the lack of a level playing field. If you see that basically the authorities usually pick out the big brands, and the small brands or the Mickey Mouse companies that disappear from the market as soon as they have placed their products on the market. You can't find them, you can't take them to justice. So this is something that is very irritating and very negative for responsible businesses.
So the PROs, how did they invest to create an easily accessible local recycling option for an electronics item? What do they do? Do they put bins in various locations? Do they partner with retailers? What's the strategy that is producing a 42.5% return rate?
Here we go. You see, you need legislation to, let's say, to structure this, because if it's purely voluntary, who will invest in a container park, a collection point, as we call them? So you need municipal collection points. You also need retailers to be obliged to take back appliances that people return to the shop. In Europe, that's the case. A retailer is required to take back whatever appliance you bring back. And so you need this.
What happens if they don't? What would happen to a retailer if they didn't? Would they be shut down?
Yeah, then if this has never happened to me, for example, but if it did happen, I would certainly report it to the authorities, because a shop cannot just decline. Of course, if it's a very small shop, they can decline. But in principle, a shop has to take back the waste appliances that you return. And so this has to be, you have to structure this by means of contracts with retailers. You have to set up collection points. You have to also run awareness campaigns. They are extremely costly. They're run in the tens of millions to raise awareness among citizens. People underestimate this. And the thing is also that you always have free riders on the market, or people who pick up the electronics outside the formal system. And that's also a big headache.
So let's call them illegal recyclers, for lack of a better word. Are they prosecuted when they do that kind of thing? Or is it simply that they go out of business and might pop up again as yet another illegal recycler?
We have looked into this a few years ago in a research project, and exactly as you say, you have all sorts of situations. And there, prosecution does happen from time to time. But the thing is that the penalties are not dissuasive enough. So you have crooks and criminals that export electronic waste illegally to poor countries, for example, and then they are caught and they are taken to justice, and they have a fine of 4,000 euros, something like that.
They just see those fines as part of the cost of doing their illegal business.
Exactly. Like. They see it as part of the business, and they see it as it's not nice, but it's part of the business, yes.
So thinking about the U.S., and we have a very fragmented recycling system. It's essentially 50 states and 3,300 localities or more that have various levels of rules. Is the EU so much more centralized in terms of its legislation that you can count on, as a consumer, being able to call and report somebody regardless of what country you're in?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think one of the main differences is also with Australia, for example, or Canada, is that we have much more dense populations. I mean, I come from Belgium, for example, and our population is extremely dense. Also, the Netherlands. Sweden is less densely populated, but where I live, you have collection points every few kilometers. So that's
I spent a lot of time in the Netherlands, and it is incredible. Street corners will have 7 to 10 bins, depending on where you are. So are you saying that you think that urban density is one of the keys to raising the success rates in recycling?
Yeah, I think so, because the longer the distances for trucks to drive to pick up the waste, the costly it becomes, and the less willing producers are, or anyone else, to undertake these transports. That's yeah. So because you have vast distances, if you have to drive 200 kilometers, like Australia, we have a member in Australia, and they are legally required to also take back from the towns in the city of the country, but that's thousands of kilometers away from the big cities, and so it adds to the cost, of course. But that's all the more reason that you have to make sure that the playing field is level, and that everyone is subject to the same conditions.
Now, one of the ways that you characterize this, you have a project called the Urban Mine Platform, which I think is a really interesting way to characterize the existing economy, is that it is full of resources that we can extract and reuse to make the next generation of products. Tell us how you developed that concept and got electronics manufacturers thinking about the environment, as the economy as an environment that can be mined.
So this is actually embedded in a European program that stimulates the knowledge about the stocks and flows, as we call them, the stock of waste electronics. So the stock of waste electronics means how many appliances do you have in your household, in your home, that are sitting in drawers and in a box, and so on. And so we have done these studies to estimate what is actually the quantity of products, and which products are people storing in the house, and how much is recycled currently, how much is being also mined, but it's mainly the focus on secondary raw materials, on the whatever, let's say the urban mine, as we call it.
Right.
And we did this estimation because the European Union really wants to invest in making sure that we use more secondary raw materials, that we use more recycling as an option instead of primary mining. And that's the background. And so we created a platform, the Urban Mine Platform. It's the world's first platform that collects information, not just about the total quantity, but also the number of, let's say, the volume of materials and elements in the urban mine. So if you know that television contains X gram of a certain material, of copper, cobalt, whatever, and you multiply by the number of TV sets in Europe, you know how much cobalt is in the stock and will arise in the coming years. We call this the waste arising.
So a procurement manager at an electronics company could look at the urban mindscape and actually estimate how much was out there, how much might be just lying unused out there as well. And because recycling is a demand pull environment where they could literally create incentives to get that material out of the urban environment.
Exactly. So this is geared towards investors. So people who want to invest in a new recycling plant, for example, and the question they struggle with is, where should I locate my plant? So is it a better place north of Italy or maybe the south of Germany? And so this Urban Mine Platform allows them to make informed decisions. So to say, I will invest 100 million euro in the south of Germany because apparently, according to the Urban Mine Platform, the tonnage of cobalt and copper and palladium and so on that is going to arise in that area is such and such, and that looks like the best return on investment. That's the background. It's also for policymakers, but for investors, this is quite important.
So this is fascinating. So as we increasingly instrument our environment, so put more Internet of Things out there, for instance, that can tell us about the state of the environments they're in, we will also be able to start to look at this as a recycling system rather than an externality that we take care of our waste over here. It can be part of how we plan and create a profitable approach to building new technology at a lower cost and a lower environmental impact. Now, but the inverse challenge there is that the more technology you put out there, the harder it is to recycle all that stuff. How do we navigate that trade-off? Is there a short-term challenge of funding this enough to make it viable and then it runs, or will we always have to spend to keep it running?
No, that's actually a very good question, because the European Union is investing millions of euro in research projects, and the WEEE Forum has been involved in a number of these projects, such as the Urban Mine platform, which we created. And the next step is now to exploit these platforms to make sure that actually investors do use the Urban Mine platform, because that was not the case with previous projects. And the other thing you have to consider, Mitch, is that electronic waste is a societal challenge. So and therefore you have the commons problem, meaning that no one will take care of that problem on his own, because the others will benefit and he will have the cost. So that's the reason why the authorities need to, or society needs to pay for this. And that's the reason why we have these EU-funded projects going on. But of course, once we have the European Union calls this the knowledge base, meaning that you need all that knowledge in order to be in a position to take investment decisions, policy approaches, and so on. And this is what's going on at the minute. Of course, it's just really wading through mud, because it takes really years before even the building of a plant takes years. And for example, the yttrium in a lamp, in a fluorescent lamp, can easily be recovered. The technology is there, but there's such a small quantity of milligram of yttrium in a lamp that you need hundreds of thousands of lamps in one plant to be able to recover this yttrium. So, but once you know that, you could say, all right, well, we will invest in that plant in that area, considering all the costs and benefits. But if you don't know that, yttrium will never be recovered. And so that's the situation we are in now.
So as more things are digitized, do you anticipate those items in the economy being able to say, here I am and I contain this much gold or palladium or cobalt? If that's the case, could we literally get to a point where you could get an offer for your car or for your fluorescent lamp saying, that's worth something to us, we'll buy it now? Could we actually build the incentives literally into the interfaces of all these digital technologies?
I think so, yes. That's one of the, let's say, one of the visions. And we are involved in digital circular economy projects and initiatives exactly for that reason. Because, for example, my members, the PROs, the Producer Responsibility Organizations in the WEEE Forum, already invest in machinery that can identify the products that, the discarded products that pass on a conveyor belt. There's a camera that can say, this is a not washing machine, but this is a hairdryer, this is a toothbrush, and so on. And this allows the PRO to classify the products. It allows the manufacturers in that PRO to understand, okay, I put on the market 100,000 TV sets, and we are 5 years later, and X% is returned. Right. So it allows manufacturers to understand what's going on, which products are performing and which aren't. And then also, as you say, in the future, it might be possible that that there is an app that allows you to say, okay, this is my iPhone contains these materials, critical raw materials, and the current market price is this. And so that's a possibility. So this is futuristic, but in my opinion, that's totally feasible.
But there's a clear path to that. That is that we have to articulate what's in our products so that they can be tracked. And it sounds like that would be a great first step for any of the companies that are involved in these PROs, is to just characterize the materials in their products so that we were then able to say, that's what's out there, we can recover it and reuse it. Is that potentially the catalyst for some kind of a radical transformation, particularly in the US, because it's so distributed that there's no organizational starting point? You have to look at the state or the local level, like I was saying before. This could just flip the whole equation to say, we know the urban mine contains X and we need it, but it would start with profiling each product, which would also help us as conscious shoppers to make better decisions about what we're buying and using in the first place. That's a really interesting insight. I wonder how we would get a major electronics manufacturer to expose that information, because it's also seen by them as competitive information.
Exactly. That's the problem, because some manufacturers will see it as an opportunity and others will see it as a challenge. And I don't want to interfere in that conversation, but it's definitely the case that not everyone will be happy with this approach. But for example, a leading multinational that wants to, let's say, show to the world that its products contain no toxics, for example, compared to other manufacturers, or that their products are live longer lives, or they are easier to dismantle, and so on. They have a better guarantee system, and you can read all this from an app. Of course, this multinational will beat the drum and will use this app technology to do just that. And there will be some legislation in the coming years in Europe. I don't know how that legislation will look like. Some people will challenge it, and others will embrace it. I don't know. The jury is still out. But I agree with you. There are many opportunities, but also challenges.
Well, first, I want to thank you for spending the time to talk to us about this today. But tell us how people can get involved in International E-Waste Day. What should they do on October 14th to make a difference?
Well, for example, in America, I found out this morning whilst I was scrolling through the news, there's a company called Mio Wolf and Goodwill, two companies, and they are, I think they are recyclers. They are in the recycling business, and they are part of. They use it October the 14th as a hook to actually they are making a sculpture for International E-Waste Day. And I know that there are other companies as well in the United States that run social media campaigns and e-waste collections, and they also offer discounts on refurbished equipment. I don't know all of them by heart, but on our website you will find found out more about these initiatives.
Well, folks, that's at WEEE 3Es forum.org. Do check it out. Pascal, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
You're welcome, Mitch. Thank you very much.
We've been talking with Pascal Leroy, who is the Director General of WEEE Forum, an organization of electronics manufacturers who are working to develop a recycling system globally. And folks, take some time to check out WEEE-forum.org to learn more about the global best practices that are out there, and think about what you're doing with your electronics. If you have an old phone or a tablet or a TV and you are thinking about upgrading, also think about trade-in. Look for a trade-in when you do that transaction. Most electronics manufacturers will take back their old material as part of a trade-in program, and you'll see an expansion of that capability over the next couple of years as more and more electronics become recognized as valuable source material for the next generation of products. This is Earth911 Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. We, of course, will be back with another innovator interview very soon. In the meantime, I hope you'll take a few minutes to share this and other podcasts from Earth911 with your friends, your family, strangers on the street. Let's get people talking about these ideas, and let's change this economy. We'll be back soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.